Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to day 2 of KNOLSKAPE's second annual BFSI Learning Week, where AI meets BFSI in redefining the rules of the game. My name is Kunal Chikle, and I work as AVP Growth at KNOLSKAPE and your host for this evening. And I couldn't be more excited about the next 60 minutes we are about to spend together, exploring in what truly means to measure AI readiness for workforce adoption. Joining me in these 60 minutes is someone I've had the privilege of knowing for some time, and every single conversation that I've had with him has challenged my thinking and left me wanting to continue the discussion. He is the Vice President of Leadership, Talent, Culture, and Learning, and one of India's most dynamic financial institutions, Bajaj Finance Limited. He brings in a very unique blend of L&D depth and business pragmatism that you rarely find. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Rutindersingh Negi to the BFSI Learning Week. Rutinder, it's an absolute privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Kunal. That's very nice of you. Thank you.
Thank you. There truly couldn't have been a better person to join us for this discussion. Your perspective on learning, on leadership, has been absolutely amazing. So, and even on organizational transformation, absolutely. So thank you so much for your time today. Rutinder, let me start by asking you at the very beginning, because I think a lot of organizations are still figuring this out, right? When it comes to measuring workforce AI readiness, what is actually happening on the ground? Are BFSI firms using structured frameworks to measure the baseline skill gaps, or is it more ad hoc right now?
So first of all, thank you so much, Kunal, for having me over on this panel. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I thank KNOLSKAPE for extending this opportunity to me. I was telling Yamini and Kavita prior to this conversation that, you guys have brought in such questions which are absolutely apt for a CTO to answer rather than a learning person. We are all in the process of learning as we go along, and AI is a big meta shift that each one of us has been going through. Now, to be upfront, I do believe that everybody is experimenting at this point in time, including us. A lot of BFSI organizations have actually moved away from assessing AI readiness as a skill-based exercise. So when one talks about assessing readiness, what comes to mind is what are the kind of skills that you're looking at, what are the skill clusters that you're building, and so on and so forth. However, I think with the kind of disruptive force that AI is, I don't think that we have the time to do that. Instead, what a lot of organizations that I have been talking to have been doing is that they've started with key use cases and they're learning in the flow of work, just like AI is supposed to be. So they're experimenting with use cases on underwriting, collections, or customer service, and mapping which roles are using AI in those decisions. So the real shift, and for learning people, it's a big shift, because you've got to unlearn what you were doing earlier, or the approach that you would take earlier. So the real shift is that readiness is now being measured directly through the behaviors and outcomes of these use cases. For example, how often AI recommendations are actually used, and whether they are improving business metrics like conversion or risk quality. So it's actually no longer about what people know. It's about whether AI is meaningfully influencing decisions on the ground. That's the way that a lot of organizations have been looking at it.
Thank you, Rutinder. Rutinder, let me have a follow-up question for you for this one, right? What surprises you the most when you do these assessments, and what do organizations not expect to find?
Everything surprises us at this point in time. There's nothing which is not surprising us. I know of one particular use case which one of the banks was experimenting with, which was saying that we want to create a simple policy bot for HR policies. And one of the things that they went ahead to do is actually broke down each and every policy into thousands of FAQ questions, frequently asked questions. Then they created the knowledge or the memory for the bot, and then essentially went ahead and did a pilot with a closed user group to get people to actually go and try their hand at it. They found a lot of hallucination happening even then. And then they corrected the process as they moved along, and then they went ahead with a full-blooded launch. So this is essentially what is happening. So it's not the typical kind of assessments where you say, okay, you're not assessing an employee, you are actually now assessing an agent. That's what you're doing.
That's a brilliant example, Rutinder. That's actually a perfect segue to my next question, actually. So, we have seen AI doesn't land the same way across roles, right? For example, a relationship manager and a risk analyst are leaving very different AI realities. So, Rutinder, tell us, how do you think about organizations tailoring readiness assessments to reflect these role-specific demands? Would love to know more about it.
Okay, so I'll go back to the point that I was making earlier as well. See, AI readiness is actually, I don't know whether AI readiness is to be defined at a role level in a generic way, or should it be defined by the kind of decisions that a role is making and how AI is influencing those decisions. So you gave an example. You spoke about a relationship manager and let's say, a risk manager. So a relationship manager needs to use AI to improve customer conversations, but a risk manager needs to interpret and challenge AI driven scores. And a business leader needs to identify where AI can actually drive growth or efficiency. So maybe it's time for us to shift our lens and the question that we are asking. Instead of asking, is the workforce AI ready? Maybe a better question is to, are our key business decisions, becoming AI augmented? And will our people be actually equipped to handle that? So AI, in a nutshell, is not changing roles, it is actually changing decisions. And readiness should be built around decisions rather than roles. And that's what I believe.
Thank you so much. Let me also add to that and ask you, and in practice, how do you even get that role mapping right? Especially in large organizations where jobs have actually become quite fluid within that.
You go back to point number one, which is essentially you start identifying use cases. So rather than looking at uh, which are the roles and what are the skills that people need to gain, you start to look at what are the use cases within each of my business verticals. A use case for HR may be very different versus a sales use case may be very different. A use case in collections may be very different. In risk may be very different. So you actually start going and looking at the use case, which is the point that I was talking about in point number one. And from there, you start looking at, okay, hence, what are the decisions that this role needs to make while using AI? And then you go to the third level to say, okay, now how do I build or train my AI around it? And hence, how do I help my employees to go ahead and make those decisions by using that particular agent? That's the way that I see it.
Thank you. I think that's a brilliant take, Ratinder. Let me push you into a territory that I know you're deeply interested in. That's the human side of the AI wave, right? Beyond technical skills, what does an AI ready workforce actually look like at a behavioral level? And how do you, as a leader, evaluate the readiness of an organizational mindset level?
Look, it's very, very, very difficult to answer this, but let me make an attempt. Currently, what's happening is either employees are fearful about implementation of AI, or there's a lot of ambiguity and they are unaware of how AI can help them. Point number one, fearful about implementation of AI because you see news reports which are coming out again and again over days talking about 5,000 people laid off, 8,000 people laid off, and so on and so forth. So, what's the impetus or the motivation that is available for an employee to actually go ahead and start experimenting with AI? That's a core question that any organization needs to answer at this point in time. And the second is, okay, let's assume that I have been able to assure and reassure people to say, you know what, AI will be used as an augmentation tool, not a replacement tool. Maybe in some areas it may be used as a replacement tool, but your job is safe. And we look at you on how we redeploy you into other areas, or what is the additional work as a human that you will be doing, because you definitely need a human in the loop where AI is available as well. Then you go to the second part, which is how do you make them aware of how AI will help them? So fundamentally, if I view it, I would look at the behavioral shifts to be from a curiosity, experimentation, and comfort with ambiguity point of view. Now, so now how does the organization shift the conversation towards the value add for every role? So the shift to curiosity, experimentation, and comfort with ambiguity will only happen, and I'm sure it comes intuitively to everyone, is when organizations adopt a fail fast model without consequences. So, for example, if in a risk function, analysts hesitated to trust the AI driven fraud signals, and this is actually a use case from one of the international banks that they've been experimenting with. Adoption improved only after creating a safe pilot environment where errors were allowed without performance penalties. Now, you need to remove the fear and the ambiguity. That is when curiosity and experimentation will increase. So, net, if I were to say, AI adoption accelerates when the cost of experimentation is lowered, not when training is increased. I think training is the last thing at this point in time.
I think that's an interesting take, Rutinder. In fact, let me follow up this with, how do you actually find ways to measure that? Or is it more of a qualitative read?
No, it will only come through experimentation. As I said, there is no easy way of measuring it. One has to start keeping on asking these questions of, if there is let's say, an AI augmentation which has been built on a system, what's the reason that employees do not use it? Or what's the reason that only 10% of employees currently continue to use it? And that is when it will lead you to actually uncover the root issues, which largely may lie around only these two areas, which is, am I fearful or am I not clear in terms of where I need to head? So I don't think any assessments or any other type, you have to look at the metric which are associated with the bots that you are putting in place.
I think very beautifully articulated, Rutinder. I think the conversation is going on really fantastic. I must compliment you for the depth which you have in your answers, and truly providing us a human side to this AI wave. Usually, we've had conversations where the conversation can become extremely technical, but, great to have you in this fireside chat.
I'm not a technical guy, let me tell you. And as I said, this conversation is for the CTO. I can only explain some part of the human side of it.
No, but that's a refreshing change. I think most of the AI conversations are going to be leadership conversations, and they're not going to be technology conversations. So I think this is really great. Let me, ask you the next question, which we have over here, and let's talk about the elephant in the room for BFSI. Specifically, which is regulations, because unlike, say, a tech startup experimenting with AI, a bank or an NBFC is operating under a completely different set of constraints. So how does the regulatory and the compliance reality shape how you build and measure AI competency?
Yeah, so interestingly, in BFSI, the first principle is that regulation is not a constraint on AI. It is actually shaping what AI readiness really means. And it is great that regulators are stepping in into that area. Now, and some of this information is in the public domain. And if you look at RBI's recent direction with the free AI framework, the emphasis seems to be quite clear. They're saying that AI adoption must be built on trust, explainability, and accountability. Um, Models cannot be black boxes, especially in areas like credit or collections. Uh, Look at the simplistic way that they've explained it: trust, explainability, and accountability. At a second layer, there's also a strong push on, and I'm sure it makes a lot of, it's common sense. There's a strong push on data privacy, customer consent, and cyber security. Because with newer risks like model manipulation or deep fakes coming into consideration, this is a critical area where BFSI needs to step up. Uh, Interestingly, what RBI is also doing is pushing AI governance to the board level, which means that this is no longer a technology conversation. It is actually an enterprise risk and strategy conversation. So, this is how the regulator seems to be shaping AI readiness. So, from a workforce readiness perspective, this means employees cannot be trained just to use AI. They need to be trained to question it, to interpret it, and to take accountable decisions around it. That is, what seems to be uh, relevant. Um and if I were to give you an example of AI accountability, so in lending, if an AI model rejects a customer, it's no longer sufficient to say the model scored the customer low. Under the emerging regulatory thinking, the employee must be able to explain why, and more importantly, decide whether there's a valid reason to override it. So you see the difference between AI usage and AI accountability. That's the interesting one. Now, how do you go ahead and you know help your employees to understand this, that don't get boxed in? uh, you need to start questioning it and be accountable for it.
All right, great. I think explainability as the new UX is the way forward. Absolutely. I think the loan example, is absolutely relevant. And I think a lot of times what's happening is that, with AI, and if it gives you an error, you don't really know who the real villain is, right? Is it the tool? Is it the person who's given the prompts, the person who's created the model, or the institution you're dealing with? So I think, absolutely. I think great example on the loan explainability as the new UX. Let me ask you the next question, which I have over here. And, as we have all heard and know that data is the lifeblood of AI in BFSI. As they say, data is the new currency. So let's talk about data literacy on the ground. What level of data literacy is realistically required across different employee cohorts? And how are organizations like yours embedding this into readiness matrix? Would love to know more about that.
Yeah, so I won't talk about my organization, but I'll put it from a point of view of, again, let's go back to the common sense part of it, and the way I think about it. Earlier, data literacy was about understanding reports. The definition is changing. The definition now becomes, and if you go back to my previous point, it will start making sense. Data literacy is about questioning the AI output and making accountable decisions. So the lens is changing. So you have to start making better decisions in collaboration with AI. That's the moot point. How do you get an employee to a state or a stage that you are able to get them to make a better decision in collaboration? And that's augmentation. So this is how the entire, in the context of AI, data literacy is getting reframed. So Now it's about effectively how they can interpret, question, and act on the AI generated insights. So, data literacy actually becomes less of a technical skill, and now it becomes more of a decision capability. So, where you need to be spending time with your employees is actually helping them to build decision capability rather than the technical skill of data literacy, so that they are able to understand context. They are able to understand and detect patterns and anomalies. They are able to take accountable calls. So, in fact, in an AI driven organization, every employee will become a data informed decision maker, if not a data expert. That's the way I see this conundrum.
That's extremely well articulated. Thank you so much, Rutinder, for that. Uh, this brings me to my next question. Once readiness gaps are identified, what are the upskill interventions have shown the greatest impact in BFSI context? And the most important question, right? How do you measure ROI on those learning investments? I think that's a question which is of extreme importance to especially people like us who come from the learning and development industry as well.
Look, ROI from learning has been a question again, which has been going around for a long time. But as I said, I mean, I'm framing the problem slightly differently.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the organizations are seeing ROI from AI upskilling, and they're trying to do three fundamental things, uh, which, if as we went through the questions, I'm also trying to frame and structure that. First, they're shifting from a curriculum led to a use case led learning, where people are trained while solving real business problems. They use it, they experiment, they fail fast, they experiment, and they go at it again. That's what will help you to build curiosity and an experimentation mindset. Second, uh, the focus is on segmenting what does this role need AI for. So that's how you get to focus investment where it matters most. And third, ROI in a way is also about training metrics to business metrics, like reduction in cycle times or increase in conversions or number of AI use cases deployed. So that's where this lies. In fact, upskilling in I believe, is no longer a learning and development problem. It's actually integrated with business transformation. So I think there was an article about one of the companies yesterday. I don't remember the name of the company, but now the CHRO of the organization is also the CTO, and HR and technology teams both have been merged. What this signals from an organization's perspective is that transformation is the agenda which needs to be driven. The people agenda will drive itself through the transformation agenda.
All right. I also have a follow-up question, in fact, on one of the questions which I had asked earlier, which was on data, right? Like, what is the biggest mistake you've seen organizations make when they think that their workforce is, AI ready, but, data completely tells a different story? We've actually, encountered this with one of our prospects very recently. So would like to have your take on that.
Well, I don't have too much of a point of view on that, because what's it depends on what's been happening within organizations and how they've been experimenting and where the model has been breaking for them. I don't have any particular insight to share on that side, but very happy to hear what you heard along the way.
Sure. So I think obviously publicly can't discuss that because it was a conversation with one of the prospects. But Rutinder, let me move on to the next question which I have for you. And I wanted to ask you something that I think people rarely say it out loud, right? how critical is senior leadership alignment in driving workforce AI readiness? And what signals indicate that the leadership itself may be the bottleneck in adoption?
So, fundamentally, the leadership behavior can either be an enabler or a bottleneck. Now, the problem today, and a problem which I grapple with as well, I'm 45 plus. And for me, technology transformation and AI transformation are all extremely big words. And I've never been exposed to these things. Hence, I come in with a potentially distribution led mindset. And because I'm a learning expert, I come in from a learning or an employee or a skill based mindset. But what AI is pushing me to shift or to look at the problem differently, which is to say, I don't need to become an expert at AI. But what I definitely need to do is to understand the applications of AI, and hence, what are some of the use cases that I can come out with to enable the transformation. That is a key problem statement for leadership today. Uh, Organizations don't adopt AI. Leaders change what they ask for, and that is the critical point. But for that, uh, is the leader aware? And before you talk about AI transformation, there are two other steps that leaders need to go through as well. Do you take a lens on process automation? Do you take a lens on tech transformation? And then do you take a lens on AI transformation? How do you move ahead step by step? Because you are the one who needs to give direction. Now, there are much more younger people within your team who will know much more technically about AI or the use of AI. But if you as a leader are unable to influence the direction, then you will miss out the use cases. You will not be able to identify those. You will not be able to enable enterprise level growth. uh, Forget enterprise level growth. You will not be able to enable the growth within your team. And the fear is that you may be left behind of the curve. So it's actually a personal transformation journey, and leaders have to lead it, leaders at every level.
I think that's a brilliant take, Rutinder. I absolutely deep. Uh, just time for a few more questions before we hand it over to the audience. I think one of the questions I have for you is that, AI capabilities are evolving faster than any training curriculum can keep up with, right? So how do you build a readiness measurement system that stays relevant 6 months from now, not just today?
So you know, if I were to look at the stacking of the way that I was explaining it right now, the focus has to be on application, not the capability. I can give you one example of one organization which actually tracked metrics such as percentage of AI augmented decisions, process redesigns, and development deployment speed instead of training completion rates, resulting in a clearer view of readiness. So if you go back to uh, the point I was making earlier, uh, which was it's a business transformation agenda, not a learning or a people agenda. And hence, what you do, and if you look at what is the ROI that you should be tracking, is not the AI in curriculum, but you should be tracking AI in action in terms of what is the result that the AI is able to deliver for that business. And that's essentially my take on the readiness index. However, it's evolving. Um, uh, the time is not far when you will see um, maybe thousands of AI metric being tracked across the organization rather than sales volumes, loan volumes, collection volumes, asset under management volumes, and so on and so forth.
All right. Thank you so much, Rutinder. So, what we will do is, after this fantastic fireside chat, Rutinder, we will keep this open to Q&A with our audience right now. And I think, some of the most brilliant articulation when it comes to AI in people, right? So I think we have a lot of questions which are there for you from our panelists. So let me actually, pose some of the questions to you, the first question is from Rupali, and Rupali is saying that, as an L&D leader, when you look at AI readiness, how do you define it beyond training completion? And what are the key behaviors or capability indicators you track to know that employees are actually ready to apply AI in their day-to-day work?
Yeah, so I guess, Rupali, that in a way I have answered that question while I was talking about it through the points that I was making. The challenge is, how do you remove the fear and how do you increase awareness? So that's a cultural conversation. What one needs to start looking at is at the kind of decisions that employees are making while using AI, and how their accountability seems to be increasing as one goes along. And it is not about tracking the AI curriculum, but it's actually about tracking the business outcomes which are related to AI. So we have to move beyond role based to use case based. That's where we need to shift to.
Thank you, Rutinder. One more question from one of our participants is, readiness assessments can tell you the skills gaps, but they rarely capture fear, resistance, or loss of identity that many employees feel. How can one measure or respond to the emotional dimension of AI adoption?
Yeah, it's a big one. It's an enterprise level conversation. I mean, what are the signals that senior management or senior leadership is actually giving its employees to say, what is the reason why we are bringing in AI? Is it to say that focus on identifying areas of cost save and efficiency? That's one way to signal something. Or the other way to say is focus on areas and use cases so that your job becomes easier and you can start focusing on value added work as you move along. And how does this become a language for the entire senior management team to be able to take down? It's not an easy conversation. It's definitely not, but it's a lot about signaling. Um, uh, you have a house on fire. What are you going to do? Are you going to throw more oil into it, or are you going to douse it with water? So what is the strategic signaling that the organization is able to do? What is the strategic roadmap that senior management is able to bring up for employees, which connects to them, to say that, you know what, I have the opportunity of identifying use cases with this safety in mind, that I'm not going anywhere. But my ways of working are definitely going to change. That has to start from there. That's the fundamental conversation. And then it can't be left there, because signals have to be converted into constant conversations and actions. How is the entire senior management team able to convert that with into their teams, into each and every one of their employees, so that this message passes down? One of the biggest losses is the loss of transmission that happens within a large organization. How can this loss of transmission be avoided is a key question to answer. So there's no assessment that you can give to be able to remove this fear or to understand what's happening. But get more people involved, get more people involved in the right direction, let them fail fast, don't penalize them. How do you ensure that you are able to encourage them to take up more and more use cases? uh, that's essentially my take on this piece.
All right. I think that's a brilliant answer, Rutinder. Rutinder, we have so many questions coming in, right? And let me ask the next question over here. How does leadership evolve, in your opinion, around judgment and decision making with AI mass adoption?
I think the first step is to start to read. um, that's the first thing, and read anything under the sun, and read as much as possible that you can about this new technology. There's a lot of information out there. Question is, what is it that you are reading? And what is the sense making that you are drawing from it? How are you peering out and looking at other organizations to say what are some of the other organizations doing? Because this helps in sense making. It gives you an understanding of, okay, hey, somebody has been able to crack this, why can't I look at it? And that's essentially, I would say, the first step. Because if you don't know where you are going with it, how will you be able to make a decision on whether it is right or wrong? So that's the first step. The second step is, get into use cases yourself. If you as a leader haven't experimented with Copilot Studio or haven't built agents, then you have no right to be asking your team to be doing so. Now, the moment you start doing that, you actually start to understand what works and what doesn't work. That's the second step. So do it yourself. Get your hands dirty. This is completely new. For people like us, we are dinosaurs. For me, I personally actually went to Zapier. I tried to connect my LinkedIn account with Canva and ChatGPT, and I bought all of these licenses together, and I tried to make a bot for myself, which actually connects all of these things together and does posting of my automates my posts on LinkedIn. And I just input what I need on a Google Sheets. So I bring in APIization, and everything is in natural language, isn't it? You can build APIization of Google Sheets with Zapier, with LinkedIn, with Canva, and with ChatGPT. And I did it, and I horribly failed. And I tried again till I got it right. Now I understand what it takes. But in the process, I did understand that there are a lot of open APIs, and with natural language, just writing a prompt, you can actually connect 2 to 3 different systems together, and you are able to get an output. Now, get your hands dirty. Once you've got your hands dirty, you will know what are the decisions you need to make and how do you need to make those decisions.
Thank you so much for being absolutely candid. When absolutely a person who has pedigree in learning like you is candid about it, I think a lot of folks would then experiment and be, humble and honest, open and honest about it as well. So thank you, Rutinder, for that. Couple of more questions before we wrap up, right? Job roles and responsibilities are designed with the help of AI. Is it a good take, or is it my business? I should decide with my team rather than AI, and sometimes suggestions may divert our thinking. That's
this goes back to the question of accountability and the decision making that you need to do. That we were just talking about this, that what AI has told you that this seems to be the right thing. How are you looking at it? What is the value conversation that you are bringing in, and how are you questioning the output from AI is a key conversation. Let me be upfront and honest. I tried to do that as well, by the way. I said, okay, it's a great augmentation tool. Let me try and do that. But I did it slightly differently. I actually built a complete landscape in my mind in terms of how I want to see my team structured. And I started with what's the future of work that they have, and I penned it down. Then I started and wrote down, okay, for this future of work, what are some of the skill sets that I'll require for people? I penned it down. Then I said, okay, if these are the skill sets that are required for these people, uh, what should a structure, what should a new enabling structure look like, and what does everyone need to do, and how do they need to use these skills? And I started penning that down, and then went ahead to say, okay, now this is my assumed part of the structure. Now when I went back to I just didn't tell it, I gave it this input, saying that this is the way I'm thinking. Here is the reality of my context. Here is the reality of the context of my organization. Here is the reality of the context of my team. And here are the 3 or 4 things that the team has been able to do in the past and what it has not been able to do in the past. But here is where we need to go. And once you do that, try it. It will give you a very different output versus you just telling it, I'm trying to craft a few roles and responsibilities for my people. Help me to understand what is it that I can look at. Chalk and cheese. So just let me read that question again. Could you just repeat the question for me, Kunal? Roles and responsibilities. I can't see it. It's disappeared from my screen.
I think it's disappeared from my screen. But I think in a sense, they are saying that, with, AI could form those, roles, right? Jobs and responsibilities are designed with the help of AI primarily. Now, is it a good take, or is it my business to, I should decide, who should be in my team, rather AI suggesting me?
Of course you should decide. Why not? Of course you should. But and why is there this term human in the loop? You have to be able to get to a position to be able to trust the decisioning and the accountability of the AI, but that will only come with time.
Yeah, I think nuances are something which AI might not be able to pick up, especially, body language. I mean, it can, but at this stage, do you think that, we are going to come to a stage where AI is going to pick up teams?
Yeah, my personal take is that systems have become much better. I'll give you one example: translation. I used to struggle with Indian language translation for years on end. And the best efficacy that you could get out of a Google Translate was somewhere around 70-75%. That too in 3 or 4 of the key Indian languages. It would miss the nuance, it would miss the colloquiality of the translation of the language, and so on and so forth. Try it out now. There are so many other AI related platforms which are there. Go ahead, put something in English and say, I want this to be translated in colloquial Punjabi or colloquial Tamil, as if a local is speaking it. And you can see the difference that it throws up. So, of course, iterations have helped AI to learn, and it has become definitely better. Will it be 100% at any point in time? I don't know. Are we there yet? I don't know, frankly. So trust but verify is my mantra.
All right, I think that's a great takeaway. Trust but verify. All right, couple of more questions, if Rutinder, we can go and do that very quickly. AI readiness is forcing a rethink of what good talent looks like. How will it change the way you assess, hire, and develop people, and what can one do to ensure that the current talent frameworks, keeping up?
Yeah, I think it has to start with self, and then you have to start going beyond yourself to your team, and then beyond that to a broader organization or enterprise level to look at what good talent looks like. Fundamental questions: have you experimented with it? Do you like to fail fast? uh, are you able to build a simple agent for yourself? Are you able to go ahead and create APIs between 2 to 3 other systems? And all of this is available in the open domain. And interestingly, if you go to YouTube and you key in that I want to build a natural language agent which connects blah 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 to blah blah blah, you can actually go ahead and get multiple videos to know about it. Now, so what you are expecting people or good talent essentially to have as you move along is the ability to experiment, is the ability to make decisions. These are the two key areas that you need. Ability to experiment, which is fail fast, learn fast, experiment as much as possible. And the second is the ability to be curious, ask questions, and the third is decisioning. If I were looking for good talent in the current age or the AI age for a generic role, then I would essentially look at these 2 or 3 skills as the top skills to have. Learnability is quite underrated even today, but these are the top 2 or 3 skills that one would look at. If you're looking at specific role based, then as you go deeper into technical areas, etc., then of course you have to go into the technical depth of the skill. But I'm staying at a generic level at this point in time and saying, if I were to hire a person in, let's say, a sales role or a collections role, even a finance role for that matter, if subject matter expertise is there, there's a chartered accountant, I would look at 3 things. I would say, does the person have the ability to experiment? Is the person curious enough? And is the person able to make the right decisions? How do I build towards there? That's what I would look for.
All right, Rutinder, thank you so much for this wonderful fireside chat. If we have any more questions, we would love to take them. We also have a poll which is there on your screen right now. Ladies and gentlemen, please fill in this poll and we'd love to know your feedback. I think this is by far has been one of the most deep conversations and, covering a human side to AI, which we typically miss, Rutinder. Rutinder, any, last words or any suggestions which you would like, to give our audience right now? Some of them would be from learning, some of them would be from other domains like business development, finance, but it would be great if, your 3 takeaways from, today's session primarily, and which we could probably use it, in our back pocket.
If the glass is full, you can't pour in more water. So my first point would be, and that's what I keep telling myself, unlearn. The second is, please experiment. Do it yourself, get your hands dirty. That's all that I will say. I mean, I'm learning as I go by. I don't think it's that complex. It's more about common sense. Of course, you will not become a technical expert, but you will definitely become good at what you do.
Thank you so much, Rutinder, for your time and for your deep insights, right? And I think one takeaway which I have, which is not primarily about AI, but it's about the humility which a leader needs to have if he or she needs to move ahead in this AI world, right? So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being such a fantastic audience. The AI BFSI Learning Week presented by KNOLSKAPE, the 2nd annual AI BFSI Learning Week, continues tomorrow and day after as well. So see you again on our next sessions. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Kunal.
Thanks, Rutinder. Thank you so much.